I'm Christina Onnested. The Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade and the right to abortion access, ending the constitutional protection that had been in place for nearly 50 years. It's considered an unprecedented move, the first time the nation's highest court has rolled back a right it's handed down. Activists on both sides of the debate are flooding to the nation's high court to decry and hail the vote. Here's a pro-choice activist.
No allowing girls to be forced to bear the children of their rapists. We will not go back. We have to rise up now.
The ruling overturning Roe v. Wade is expected to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states in the country. The decision, unthinkable just a few years ago, was a culmination of decades of efforts by abortion opponents, made possible by an emboldened conservative court that had been fortified by 3 appointees of former President Donald Trump. Anti-abortion advocates are celebrating the decision outside the nation's high court.
Friends, this is not the end of the pro-life generation, not the post-Roe generation. This is the next phase.
Abortion rights activists are calling for nationwide rallies outside federal buildings and state capitals at 5 p.m. local time. Congress is on the verge of approving a $13 billion bipartisan gun violence bill. The Senate approved the measure Thursday with 15 Republicans joining Democrats in backing passage. Here's Connecticut Democrat Chris Murphy, who helped negotiate the bill.
It doesn't do everything I want, but what we are doing will save thousands of lives without violating anyone's Second Amendment rights.
The measure is modest in scope, with money for mental health services, including at school, and funding for states which have red flag laws. More extensive background checks would be carried out for people under 21 who seek to buy a gun, and the legislation closes the so-called boyfriend loophole to keep guns away from those who have committed domestic violence. California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein said she supports the bill, but deplored its failure to stop teenagers from buying assault weapons.
However, this common sense protection does not apply to purchases of assault weapons. This disparity actually costs lives. It's simple logic. If you can't buy a beer, you shouldn't be able to buy an assault weapon. If you can't buy a handgun, you shouldn't be able to buy an AR-15. In Uvalde, 18 children and 2 teachers were massacred last month because an 18-year-old was able to buy an assault weapon. Just 10 days earlier in Buffalo, 10 people were shot to death in a grocery store because an 18-year-old was able to buy an assault weapon.
Feinstein offered an amendment to raise the minimum age to purchase an assault weapon to 21. It failed to pass. She's also proposed it as a standalone bill. The Supreme Court has delivered a major ruling expanding the ability of gun owners to carry their firearms in public. The 6-3 court struck down a New York gun law that required a person applying for a license to carry a concealed handgun in public to show a specific need to do so. President Biden called the ruling deeply disappointing. Eileen Alfandary has more.
Jonathan Lowy, the chief counsel at the gun safety group Brady, called the decision radical and dangerous.
6 justices of the Supreme Court have invented a right that has never existed in the history of the United States of people to carry loaded guns into public places so that they can take those guns out and shoot and potentially kill other Americans.
2 people who had been denied a license challenged the New York law, along with the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. New York Governor Kathy Hochul called the court decision reckless and reprehensible.
As governor of the state of New York, my #1 priority is to keep New Yorkers safe. And it's particularly painful that this came down at this moment. We are still dealing with families in pain from mass shootings that have occurred, the loss of life, their beloved children and grandchildren.
The ruling is expected to directly affect half a dozen states with similar laws: California, New Jersey, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Hawaii. I'm Eileen Alfandary for Pacifica Radio.
The House committee investigating the deadly January 6th insurrection held its 5th hearing Thursday, looking into then-President Donald Trump's pressure campaign on the Department of Justice to help him overturn the presidential election that he lost to keep him in power. Christopher Martinez has more.
Much of the hearing focused on an obscure Department of Justice lawyer named Jeffrey Clark. He's an environmental lawyer who had represented oil giant BP and later became Assistant Attorney General for Environment and Natural Resources. Clark authored a draft Justice Department letter to Georgia questioning their election and urging the Georgia legislature to hold a special session to decertify Biden electors and replace them with Trump supporters. Trump also considered replacing his own acting Attorney General with Clark. Those and other efforts by Trump were resisted by top justice officials, as well as others who threatened to resign if Trump appointed yet a third Attorney General in a matter of weeks. The hearing also heard about Trump's attempt to appoint a special counsel to investigate voting fraud, namely his now discredited campaign lawyer Sidney Powell. Republican Committee co-chair Liz Cheney of Wyoming closed with a statement addressed to what she described as millions of Americans who put their trust in Donald Trump.
It can be difficult to accept that President Trump abused your trust, that he deceived you. Many will invent excuses to ignore that fact. But that is a fact. I wish it weren't true, but it is.
Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
Federal agents searched the Virginia home of Trump-era Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, who championed Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. They also seized records from key Republicans in at least 4 states linked to the former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Clear signs authorities are ramping up their investigation of associates of the former president. The European Union leaders have agreed to make Ukraine a candidate for EU membership. The unanimous agreement was unusually rapid. Ukraine applied for membership less than a week after Moscow invaded the country February 24th, nearly 4 months ago. The process for Ukraine to join the EU could take several years or even decades. Countries must meet a host of economic and political conditions, including the embrace of certain democratic principles. The European Union also granted candidate status to Moldova. The U.S., the Biden administration announced it will send another $450 million in military aid to Ukraine, including some additional medium-range rocket systems to help push back Russian progress in the war. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.